Okay. Tonight, our presentation will be given by Dr. Michael Ryce, who will give a talk based on his book called Why Is This Happening to Me Again? Dr. Ryce talks from a unique original synthesis of science, naturopathic medicine, spiritual psychology, and theology, rich with insights from the ancient Aramaic language and teachings of Jesus. The talk will provide workable tools for self-healing, putting an end to recurring life patterns, and consciously renewing your life. He is the founder and co-director of Heartland, a self-healing sanctuary in the Ozark Mountains, and has conducted many online workshops. He's the director of Kaboris Manuscript Foundation, which is translating a copy of the oldest known New Testament in its native Aramaic language dating back to approximately 164 AD. This manuscript reveals the unique Aramaic inner process of forgiveness, and as it was originally taught by Jesus 2,000 years ago. So, wow, you have a nice screen behind you. Dr. Ryce is going to give a short intro, then we're going to show the video, and then we'll have the Q&A afterwards. The video is from a workshop that he did not too long ago. Okay, Dr. Ryce, it's your turn. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Pat. Delight, honored to be here. Excuse my long hair. I've never had hair this long in my life, but since COVID started, we're taking care of my father-in-law, and he's 88. So we're being very careful with COVID and all, staying hunkered down. And delighted to be here. I've had several conversations with Diane, especially about where we wanted to go with tonight's presentation. And one of the things that came up was this idea that people are constantly being told they need to raise their vibration. And I want to throw out that that's not even possible. You are what you are, and that's just the way it is. You can change the energetic patterns which exude from your physiology. I go back about 35 years ago, and I used to keynote at a conference called Global Science. And at the Global Science Conference one year, Marcel Vogel, many of you are probably familiar with Marcel's name. Marcel was a 23-year senior scientist from IBM. He was the only scientist on IBM staff that didn't have a degree. And the reason he didn't have a degree is because nobody could teach him anything. At the age of 11, Marcel invented and patented chemical light. You know, you go to a football game and you buy a light stick, and it's a plastic tube, but inside of it there are a couple of glass rods, and you break the glass rods and the chemicals mix and it lights up. That was Marcel's invention at the age of 8. His family didn't have the money to patent it. He patented it himself. If you have a computer, the reason your computer works is because Marcel, working for IBM, developed the magnetic coating for your hard drive that allows your hard drive to store information. That's the kind of mind Marcel had. And this particular year, and I didn't realize how important at the time he presented this piece of information would be to the work I've developed over the last 50 years. But what Marcel did is he brought a thing called a Delaware camera. And a Delaware camera works a little differently from your average camera, where your normal camera, you click the shutter, the aperture opens, and light lands on the photographic plate and is registered there. Well, the Delaware camera had a tuning mechanism in front of the aperture. So when you opened it, the camera brought in frequencies, if they were there, that the camera was attuned to, not just light frequencies. And so what Marcel showed us was that he could take a picture of the high energy waves that leave the mind when we think a thought. And we have this body-mind unit, which has generations and generations and generations of patterned thinking in it. And perception is a product of what's stored in that structure. And for many people, seldom has anything to do with what's actually going on in the world. And when we recognize that we have stored within our structure, literally every thought, every feeling, every reality experienced by at least every one of the previous 4 generations in our bloodline, then we realize that whatever is held there becomes the energy that we literally send out into the world. And because the world is governed by a law called the law of resonance, it will tend to draw back or into our space that which we exude, that which we send out. And then everything that we think we see in the world is filtered through that content. And in fact, what we see, our perception, is a result of what's firing within us. It's not a result of what's happening in the world. It is stimulated by what's happening in the world, but actually the world we see, the world we experience, as we'll talk about in this video, is a product of what's firing within us and produces quite literally the world we see. If we find ourselves in a lower vibration, it's because there are lower energies basically founded in hostility and fear from the generations. And that's what if that's what we're sending out into the world, even if we're not aware of it, then that's what we're going to tend to draw back to us. So rather than raising your vibration, the truth of who you are is the truth of who you are. That's never going to change. But what you send out into the world, if it is patterned after generations of hostility or fear, the way you can change that and therefore change what you draw into your life through resonance is the removal of the frequencies that don't belong. And interestingly enough, if you go back 2,000 years in the Aramaic language, which is the root language of at least 5 of the world's major religions, not just the man named Yeshua, but at least 5 of the world's major religions, the word that represents removal of what doesn't belong within your structure is the word forgiveness. Now, the Greeks came along and told us that forgiveness was about how somebody else is the reason you're experiencing upset, disturbance, pain, or trauma, and that you're exuding upset, disturbance, pain, and trauma, that that's your vibration. And that what you should do is just let them off the hook for the fact that that's moving inside of you. If I let somebody else off the hook for what's moving inside of me, have I changed anything that's moving inside of me? If I stand in front of 7.5 billion people on the planet and I shake every one of their hands and I say, I forgive you, I forgive you, I forgive you, I forgive you, have I done anything to change what's happening inside of me? And therefore, what's sourcing the vibration, the energy that I send out and draw back and filter through. I haven't done anything to do that. So in Aramaic, when you hear the word forgiveness, think the word removal, not the word letting others off the hook. And now you've got the key that if you consistently and persistently apply that tool of forgiveness, you will remove the energetic patterns that go back many generations that never belonged within you. When you do that, everything in your world will change. Trying to force somebody else to change because there's pain or trauma moving in you, trying to let somebody else off the hook because there's pain or trauma moving in you, does nothing to change what's moving in you. The work of forgiveness is about removing from your instrument what doesn't belong and upgrading your instrument. Once your instrument reaches the level of vibration that matches who you are, then you're sending out into the world those energetic patterns that match who you are. And you are going to see and experience a whole different game in your life. So that'd be my starting point. And what people tend to do is they tend to manifest according to the energetic patterns that they hold within them. Interestingly, in this culture, we tend to talk about manifesting as well. I want to manifest a new car. I want to manifest. Actually, in Aramaic, the word manifest means obvious. If it's obvious to you that the world is based on trauma and drama and somebody's out to get you, guess what you're going to manifest? That which is obvious. And you're going to experience people who are there to get you and all the things that you believe. And until you reach into yourself and learn to remove those patterns, then your manifestation will tend to remain the same. So the instrument is what you want to upgrade. I can listen to Rachmaninoff on a $10 transistor radio. And I'll get to hear Rachmaninoff in one of his symphonies. But if I listen to that on a $100,000 stereo system, I'm going to get a whole different experience. The work that needs to be done is the work of upgrading the instrument so it is a fit instrument for the expression of who you are. And who you are, as we'll see in this video that unfolds, is the created essence of love. So there's a starting point, and I don't know where we go from there, if we've got space for any questions, or we just roll video and go to Q&A.
Let's just go right into the video.
Awesome.
Oops. Okay, and you might need to turn your speaker up to make sure you can hear this, and take notes and write down your questions. Hang on. I gotta press start first.
Anybody that's here ever had any conflict in any of your relationships? Nobody? Well, we don't need to do any more then. Nobody. It's 2 hands. Okay, hands and feet. All right, we got the right audience. So, in order to avoid those conflicts, have you ever taken the geographic tour? You change relationships, you go to the other side of the country, and the person who picks you up at the airport finishes the sentence that the person who dropped you off started. What happened? How do they know what to say to you? Well, unknowingly, for most people, we literally transmit energetically everything that's going on for us, and life responds. When we hold energies from this side of the board, over here on the right side, what happens is we hold disintegrative energies, and disintegrative energies held in the cell are disease producing. Now, if we go to the opening words in the book of John, where we're told it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word became flesh. It's not what it says at all. What it says in Aramaic is, in the beginning was the mind energy, and the mind energy became flesh. When I engage in a thought, I literally produce a molecule in my body. Now, Deepak Chopra talks about that as the non-visible becoming visible, the non-physical becoming physical. And of course, when we're talking about physical, we realize that it's all just energy and it's levels of awareness of energy. So we're aware of energies on what we call the physical through what are called our physical senses, but we're not necessarily aware of the qualities that they hold. So when we originate mind energy, that literally becomes a neuropeptide within our structure. And that neuropeptide circulates around within us until it finds a cell with a receptor site that matches. The neuropeptide lands on the cell. Now, the cell biologists are saying that then the cell replicates it. I don't think that's what's really happening. I think what's really happening is when we originate mind energy, because we're creators, we're originating our creation. When we put that mind energy into a cell, when it lands on the cell informs us of the quality of our creation. And rather than the cell replicating the neuropeptide, my offering is what happens. I'm going to put my markers down for a second. If we're looking from the inside, is that, or from the outside, when it lands on it, inside it's inserting itself in the cell. And the frequencies that we see being inserted are what we call chemistry. And it changes the nature, the function, the communication, and the direction of the cell. Now, relative to this integrated energy system, if we listen to Einstein, he says, on such things as matter, we've been all wrong. What we have heretofore called matter is energy. Energy whose vibrations have been so lowered as to be perceptible to the senses. There is no matter. Matter doesn't exist. What exists is energy in form. And relative to this integrated energy system that we call a body-mind unit, there are two qualities. There's integrative energy, that which is over on the left side of the board, and disintegrative energy, that which is over here on the right side of the board. Now, we've had the experience over the last 2 years. Our granddaughter came into the world just a little over 2 years ago. And it was this little baby, little structure. And you know something? She doesn't look like that at all today, 2 years later. And she doesn't look at all like she looked at a month or 2 months or 3 months or 4 months or 5 or 6 or 10 or 20. And have to conclude, if you get out of the dullness of incapacitated perception, what you notice is this form is a piece of plastic. It's in a state of becoming. And it becomes according to the energetic patterns in which we engage. If we engage in these things on the right side of the board, hostility and fear, grief, rage, anger, sadness, jealousy, revenge, then we're continuously putting into the cells that are storing that particular energy. And my offering is that every cell in your structure functions as a brain cell, functions to store information. And so we're literally changing the plastic nature of every cell and overall the whole structure of this thing we call a body-mind unit. And we're laying that on top of, we can't just step in, or at least normally, I think we get to a level of power where we might be able to, but we don't just step in and make an instant change in a whole structure. Why? There are 1,000 generations of that mind energy becoming flesh within each of our structures. We don't have to direct its becoming, it's happening. But as we grow in awareness and choose to engage in energetic patterns, we start to direct its becoming. This side of the board, we direct it into the disease process. This side of the board, we direct it into health and wholeness and higher states of being. And if we lived on a planet where 7.5 people woke up every morning, 7.5 billion people, woke up every morning realizing that this is who they are, how different would our creative process be? If we didn't have people playing these games, if we weren't playing these games, how different would this piece of plastic look for each of us? What would it be capable of? And as I say, when we engage in that mind energy and it lands on the cell, that mind energy, when it's of a disintegrative nature, the cell says, ouch, it informs us that the quality of our creative process is off base. But what do we do? Well, what our culture has taught most of us to do is blame somebody else for that. Have you ever said this to somebody? You made me really mad. You hurt me. You really have a problem. You ever said that to somebody? And the question I like to ask is, if they're the one with the problem, why are you the one with the pain? That doesn't make any sense. If they're the one with the problem, they'd be the one with the pain. But if you're in pain and you think somebody else has got a problem, you've got a problem. Now, we have a definition for the act of thinking or speaking as though something outside of you is causing what's happening inside of you. And that's called denial. So denial is the act of thinking or speaking as though something outside of us is causing something inside of us to happen. Now, something outside of us can cause something that's inside of us to move or intensify in its movement, but it can't cause that energy to be there. It has to be there in the first place. But when we live in this game of denial, whenever I feel this way, I talk about them or somebody or anybody. What happens is that in order to pretend that my feelings aren't coming from the interaction of my mind energy and my cells, I have to hide that whole process from myself. I literally have to dissociate from that process. And I have to hallucinate. I have to generate a worldview, a perceptual construct that tells me that the problem is really out there. And of course, one of my favorite tongue-in-cheek lines, which many of you have used many times, is, if you've been through it 87 different times with 42 different people, how is it that you're the only one that was there every time? Sooner or later, we have to acknowledge that we're engaged in our own lives. But if we spend our whole lives in denial, you made me mad, you made me sad, you made me angry, you hurt me, that upset me, they disturbed me, then we have a device called a mind that continuously constructs the world we see as though that was true. And what that means is that the real cause of what we're experiencing, we have to dissociate from. And if you were involved in this work back in the early days, you remember that I used to write on the board, deny, suppress. And it totally changed the work when I was given this instruction. I mean, I had specific instructions that were given internally from Ruka that said, Michael, no, it's not suppress. It's not merely hiding something from yourself. It's locking it away and throwing away the key. Once you're in an arena where you're in denial, you made me mad. Your mad is no longer yours to change. So guess what? You now have a life sentence of mad. Anybody and everybody that can trigger that into activity can seem to make you mad. Why can they make you mad? Because mad is there. And if mad is there, it's an energy. And if you pushed it down 1,000 times, there's a very intense high energy wave radiating out from you that says to all the world on an energetic level, hey world, is there anybody that knows how to make me mad? Have you ever noticed there's never a shortage of volunteers? Why is that? Because life abhors you being diseased. Life doesn't want you dead. So life has been structured, it seems, so that if you are holding to a dis-ease energy and you've dissociated from it, someone's going to show up, and that happens through the law of resonance. Someone is going to receive the energetic invitation to come to your life and do to you exactly what you never wanted to have done. And if you tell them what's wrong with them and you get rid of them and you go away and you take the geographic cure, you'll find somebody else and somebody else and somebody else. I feel so blessed the universe reserved the title of my book for me. Why is this happening to me again? Because virtually everybody in the universe has asked the question. And probably the greatest atrocity done to us as human beings down through the ages and that we've bought into is that we've had hidden from us the fact that we are by nature creators. Nobody told us that. They told us all kinds of crazy things, but they didn't tell us that through the energetic patterns we engage in, we create our own cellular health and diseases. We create everything that shows up. We literally create the way this piece of plastic called a body-mind unit unfolds and becomes either toward disease or toward health. It depends on what the predominant resonant energy is in your structure. So for people who live in this state of denial, this state where it's all everybody else's fault, they hold all of these causes within themselves, but they press those causes down, hide them from themselves, and by so doing, intensify them every time they have to press it down, and therefore send out a signal that gets even stronger and stronger and stronger. Imagine that I've got a 3-foot diameter spring that sits here on the floor and it stands 3 feet high. Can that spring do anything sitting there on the floor? Not at all. But what happens if I push down on it and lock it? And I push down on it and lock it. And I push down on it and lock it. What happens after years of doing that? And I let the lock off. A lot of power stored in the spring. If I've been spending years and years and years telling everybody else why they're the problem in my life, I'm pushing down that energy, adding energy and information to it. And by so doing, I'm setting up literally an attractive energy field that will resonate or pull somebody into my life to do it to me again. So when I live life that way, when that's the game that I play, the things that I most don't want to deal with are literally stored in brain cells. When I talk about building brain cells in this work, I'm not talking about building new physical structure. I'm talking about the fact that every cell in the structure is designed to store information, literally to store frequencies. So every cell can hold energetic patterns and therefore function as a brain cell. When there are certain brain cells that I don't want to deal with, things that I'm in denial about, I push those things down and hide them, I intensify them, and by so doing, I set up a high energy wave. Now, I didn't know at the time how important a piece of information this was going to be way back, and this goes back probably 35 or 36 years ago. I used to keynote at a conference called Global Science out in Colorado. And one year, a gentleman named Marcel Vogel came to the conference. Marcel was a 23-year senior scientist from IBM. He was the only non-degreed scientist that IBM ever had on their payroll. And the reason he was non-degreed was because he was self-educated and nobody could teach him anything. At the age of 11, Marcel invented chemical light. You know, you go to a football game and they've got these light sticks and you break the glass tubes inside the plastic and the chemicals mix and they light up. Well, that was Marcel's invention. He invented that at 11. His family didn't have the money. Marcel patented it himself. If your computer works, guess why? Marcel invented the magnetic coating on the plates of your hard drive that allows your hard drive to store information. That's the kind of mind that Marcel had. And what he did this particular year is he brought a thing called a Delaware camera. It was created by a man out of England named George Delaware. This camera is a little different than your average camera. Normally, you click the shutter, the aperture opens, light energy comes in, gets registered on the photographic plate, you develop it, you've got a picture. Not so with the Delaware camera. In between the aperture and the photographic plate, there's a tuning mechanism. So you can literally tune the camera, somewhat like a TV set or a radio, as to what frequencies it receives. And so what Marcel was able to do with this camera was he was able to attune it to the frequency of waves that leave the mind when we think a thought. And what Marcel was able to do was to take pictures of the high energy waves that leave the mind when we think a thought. So whatever we're holding in the way of mind energy within our structures, from our own lives or from our genes, we're literally sending out a composite of frequencies continuously. And because the universe is governed by the law of resonance, now, the law of resonance, simply stated, says this: when two energy systems are in tune or in harmony with each other, there's an interchange of energy between them when one system is amplified above the other. You probably remember from physics class in high school. You took a middle C tuning fork, you hit it on a desk, and you put it in front of a second middle C tuning fork. The second middle C tuning fork was not moving. But when you put the first energized tuning fork in front of it, the second tuning fork started to move. It's called resonance, transfer of information. So notice that this tuning fork is moving, and through resonance, that one starts to move. Resonance creates motion. You might think about let's imagine you've got a baby grand piano, you have two of them, and you open the top of the two baby grand pianos. Now there are hundreds and hundreds of keys in each piano. But if I go over to one of those pianos and I hit the middle C, and I go look into the second piano, there are going to be a bunch of strings vibrating in that second piano. Guess which ones? Only the ones that are keyed to middle C are going to be moving in that second piano. So resonance creates motion. Now, in the human realm, my offering is, resonance adds another piece to the puzzle. And that is, resonance creates motion toward. So, you know, I hit middle C on this piano. The other piano isn't going to get up and crawl up on top of it. It's not going to create motion toward. But in the human realm, when I set up a frequency, those who are in resonance with that frequency are going to tend to be drawn into my space. And if there's something that I have denied and dissociated from 1,000 times, and it's deeply hidden away in the darkest recesses of my mind, I don't even know it's there. But having pushed it down 1,000 times, it's got a pretty powerful wave coming out of it. Now, if this person has the matching bag of garbage, if this person has the brain cells and the behaviors that match what I've denied and dissociated from, unless they are very conscious, they will tend to be directed by that energy wave. That energy wave will resonate these brain cells in them. Those brain cells will fire, constitute their, what they would call their conscious thought and behavior, and they're going to tend to do a behavior toward us. Guess what the behavior is likely going to be? Let's see if that's true. Has anybody ever gone into somebody's space totally committed to being loving, nurturing, and caring, and all of a sudden found yourself functioning like a mad banshee? What happened? Well, here's my offering. You went in totally committed to being loving and nurturing and caring, but their high energy wave set something else in motion. It resonated your mad banshee. And when your mad banshee started to move, that took over your behavior, and there you were, doing it to them again. That's how the why is this happening to me again principle occurs. And guess what? Even if you didn't do it, they're going to see you do it. Michael, that doesn't make any sense. Oh yeah, it does when you know how the mind operates, because here's what's going to happen. When they do that behavior, when they bounce off of that high energy wave in you and do that behavior, they're going to resonate those very brain cells that you've denied and dissociated from. When those brain cells start to fire, they're going to create a perceptual construct that will be projected from those brain cells, and you're going to show up in their mind. Literally, they will see a body that they call you in their mind with and made up of the threads of energy of what you denied and dissociated from. So they're going to show up in your mind with your problem with that. You're going to see that it's their problem. It's going to be really clear to you. But then, notice, you've been through it 87 different times with 42 different people. And you're the only one that's there every time. This is an internal process that comes about as a result of denial and dissociation. So what happens when we deny and dissociate, this is the energetic pattern that occurs. And then, when those brain cells fire, and we live in a culture, you know, psychology tends to tell us that projection is taking something that's inside of you and putting it outside. That's not projection. That's externalization. Projection is when I take brain cells I've denied and dissociated from, and I generate perception out of it. I generate the picture world that I see. Now it's interesting, and of course we've been teaching this for decades, but a couple of years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago now, we came across some research that was done by the CIA. If you go to cia.gov, you can download a book. God knows how many taxpayer dollars they spent on it. It was called The Study of Human Intelligence. And there's a chapter in it on perception. They're studying how perception works. And here's their bottom line conclusion. You can go to the CIA website and download this book free. What it says is, the mind does not record reality, the mind generates reality. This perceptual world, the world that you see, is a generated world. And as a generated world, it is a construct of your mind. And until you interrupt what's at the root of the way your mind constructs the world that you see, you will tend to be stuck in this pattern of denial, dissociation, and then projection. Now, our culture tells us that we have a pair of windows that we all get to look out of and see what's going on in the world. That is probably the biggest lie you've ever been told. You do not have a set of windows that look out into the world. It's not possible. You have an antenna. It's called the eye. It's a frequency receiving device. It receives frequencies based in light energy. Light energy enters the eye, and through the law of resonance, the information that comes in through the eye resonates brain cells. And brain cells generate perception, the world you see. You can't look out through this antenna. All the eye is, as the other senses are simply frequency receivers. They're just receivers of energy. And whatever energy you have brain cells for, whatever brain cells it resonates in you, the brain, the mind, distinguish between those two because the mind functions through every cell in the body, the mind generates this perception. And it's interesting, there's some Harvard research that says that in a time frame where 10,000 brain cells fire, that is, there are 10,000 measurable units of electrical activity going on within this structure. In that time frame, which is about a 25th of a second, the maximum amount of data that goes into building your perceptual world is 9 bits. That's it. You get to see 9 bits out of 10,000 brain cells firing. And it's been estimated that the actuality of the world perhaps can change as much as 20 trillion bits in that same time frame. So we're looking at a tiny, tiny fragment of what's actually happening in the world and a tiny fragment of what's going on within our minds. Now, when you get down to that, what you call this sort of a device is an evidential device. When you're only looking at 9 bits of data out of 10,000 brain cells firing, you're looking at evidence. There are no facts there. There is only evidence. And there's a device, or there's a function in the mind called a bias. And you know, in electronics, if you've got a, let's say you've got a transistor, and that transistor is designed to pass a certain frequency. You have to apply a voltage to it that allows that to pass. Well, it's pretty much the same here. You have to apply a willingness to have certain evidence present itself. And so that bias that is what's contained in literally our whole generational pattern. And as a result, the only evidence we ever get to see is evidence of our own BS. And of course, that's a belief system. Anybody else have a different reality for those initials? If you have a different reality for those initials, I'll invite you to notice that's your reality. It's not mine. It's a belief system. I've had people who got, upset with me for writing the initials BS on the board. And notice that they weren't upset because of my meaning, my reality, my perceptual construct for BS, belief system. They were upset and disturbed by a perceptual construct in their minds for those initials. All upset is internal. You can't be upset unless you have an upsetting energy within yourself. And if you live in denial, they upset me, then dissociating from that upset, you will project it into your brain's image of someone else, and an endless procession of people will show up being the problem in your life. But you're the only one that was there every time. And when you understand that, these eyes don't see out there, but the world you see is generated from the firing of brain cells within you. Dr. Tim introduced a video by a gentleman, and take a look on, you can go into YouTube and search for Anil Seth, A-N-I-L-S-E-T-H. And he does a beautiful presentation where he informs us that the brain doesn't see light and the brain doesn't hear sounds. No such thing happens. The brain, perceptual system, is constantly making its best guess about what's going on out there. When you realize that's how your perceptual system works, then, and you realize that perception has a quality, you gotta have a standard by which to measure the perceptions you're going to accept and the ones you aren't. There is a sign within your structure that will tell you 100% of the time when your perception is off base. And that is your perception fueled by either hostility or fear? Remember I asked you earlier, anybody ever accuse you of doing something you've never done or saying something you've never said. You know, most everybody in the audience will raise their hand, kind of laugh. Yeah, I sure have. Take a moment and think about any time in your life where somebody's done that kind of accusation and they were not correct. What state of mind were they in when they accused you of saying something you never said and doing something you never did, even though they swear they saw you do it? Guaranteed. It's always hostility and fear. Now, that makes sense to you when you're looking at other people. But notice that you still have a tendency to trust your mind when it's doing hostility and fear. Hostility and fear are indicators that the mind is using corrupt data to build the world that you see. If you come from generations and generations and generations of hostility and fear-based perception, then it seems like that's the only thing possible, is perceptions based in that. But the mind does not record reality. The mind generates reality. If your mind is generating your reality out of hostility or fear, and remember, this is reality. The perceptual output of the mind is your reality. And what's going on in the world, this 20 trillion bit world, is actuality. When you can let the actuality come in and teach you, well, what are you going to have to do to be able to do that? You're going to have to make a space for it to happen. You're going to have to collapse this projection. Guess what forgiveness does? Is forgiveness about letting other people off the hook because pain or trauma is moving in you? Forget it. Never forgive anybody for anything. Many people say, oh yeah, that's right, I have to forgive myself. Never forgive yourself for anything because you can't. It's not possible. What the Greeks taught us was to let other people off the hook. They taught us pardoning in place of forgiveness and totally bastardized the idea of forgiveness. Forgiveness is the tool with which you collapse perceptions based in hostility and fear, and you leave a clean and open space within your mind for something based in active love to come forward. And when that happens, then what enters into and what fuels the human mind is this state of being that we are designed to function out of. And this physiological device becomes a home where love is incarnated and embodied, and it fuels absolutely everything. So the key tool that's needed, if you recognize that your life has any given arenas, it might be in the arena of relationships or money or business or work or employers, employees, whatever arena it's in, if you find yourself, your mind producing hostility and fear, your job, should you choose to accept it, is to weaken those frequencies of hostility and fear until they can no longer take over your perceptual system. Now, each of us has an innate tendency to perceive life in a certain way. That's because we have generational patterns. Remember we talked about there's integrative energy, there's disintegrative energy. Interesting, in the Aramaic language, the word that describes disintegrative energy is sin. It's an interesting word in Aramaic. The word sin has nothing to do with some terrible, awful thing that you've done. The word sin in Aramaic is actually an archery term. When you picked up the bow and arrow and you fired at the bullseye and you missed the bullseye, the scorekeeper yelled sin. All it means is you're off the mark. That's all it means. And if I put an energy that's off the mark, some form of hostility or fear, into a cell, I begin the degradation of that cell. Now let's go back to the Aramaic way where they informed us the wages of sin is death. Now I can remember being a kid and thinking, oh, God's going to get me for my sins. That's what I was taught. You're going to be punished for your sins. And here we live on the punishment planet. How common is that belief? What if we lived on a planet where 7.5 billion people could not even conceive of punishment, let alone reach out and punish? What if we had 7.5 people who simply functioned as love, and punishment never entered their awareness in any way, shape, or form? How different would our world be? I'm offering a worldview that that's possible, and that's where we want to go with this work. So when they said the wages of sin is death, all they were saying is, if you put disintegrative energy on top of disintegrative energy on top of, you're going to die. Your structure isn't going to be able to carry that burden. Literally, mind energy becoming flesh. That chemistry that we call it, that lands inside the cell, is going to create deterioration of the cell. You get enough cells deteriorating, you get an organ system failing. You get enough organ system failing, and you die. Life can't be supported in a system that is filled with sin. And it's got no connotation of, evil, bad, wrong, nasty. It's just, what quality of energy are you engaging in? And then you remember they said, the sins of the fathers will be passed, yea, unto 3 and 4 generations. This is straight out of scripture, and guess what? It's got nothing to do with religion. It's just the way the system works. It's interesting, I came across this morning some emails from a friend from several years ago, and I sent him some of the material from the Beatitudes, the Cabour's manuscript, and he passed it on to a friend of his, business acquaintance. And I just read it this morning, and this fellow is Jewish, and he was putting forward some of Yeshua's ideas, and you're, man, these kinds of ideas. And this guy, this executive from a company he was working with, sent back, he says, what, you and Jew are talking about Jesus? I'm going to have to sit down and have 2 shots of tequila before I read this. Because our world's been brainwashed that this is about religion. And that's just another scam to keep people separated and finding somebody else at fault and not living as their true nature. What this man said is, this is what causes you to die. And you have generations of that in there. Who told you that literally, you go back 4 generations, and that's 31 lives. Who told you that you have every thought, every feeling, every reality structured within your structure of the previous 30 people in your generation? Did anybody tell you that? The thoughts, the feelings, the attitudes, the perceptual constructs of mom and dad, and mom and dad's mom and dad, and their moms. Did anybody tell you that? This book called Scripture is not about theology. Here's where it's about genetics. It's about physics. It's about physiology. It's about psychology. It's about how this energy system called life works. But the Greeks didn't want us to know that. You'll notice the Greeks, they can be gods that rape their own mothers and hurt their own children. Pretty heavy-duty group of folks. So through that filter came this insane interpretation of something that was just meant to help you to determine how to live your life. So if you've got generations of energies that are off the mark in there, you're in trouble. And of course, you think about 3 to 4 generations, and where did the fourth generation back get their thoughts, their feelings, their realities? But from the previous generation and the previous. And so what this work ultimately is inviting you to do, and I'll say that having developed this and worked with this for almost 50 years now, when people are first introduced to this, they get it on a certain level. But it isn't until people work with it for 5 to 10 years that they really grasp what it's about, what it really means. And what we're inviting each of you to do is to develop a skill unheard of in our culture. And that is the skill of being able to delve inside of your own energy system, to learn to collapse projections of untoward energies, move into and literally decode what's in the cell. Literally, that mind energy comes in, lands on a receptor site, is integrated in the cell. The skill is to pull that out of the cell and throw it away. That's forgiveness. And to be able to literally develop the skill to go down to the point where you literally are sensitive enough to the energies contained within your structure that you can go back into the generational patterns and pull the neuropeptides out of the genes that create that pattern, that create this inclination that's activated in certain ways in your life. So we're inviting you to develop a set of skills. And it doesn't happen on day 1 or day 2 or day 10 or day 20. You know, I have people like, oh, I got $5 in 5 minutes, tell me everything you know. No, it's not how it works. I use an example of that. And I say this by way of hopefully inspiring you to really take, I'm suggesting you do at least 2 worksheets a day in each assignment as they come as we go through this intensive. And if you do, through the period of the 14 weeks, you'll integrate it into your life as a habit and it will become yours for life. That's one of the benefits of doing this intensive this way, as opposed to people coming to Heartland for 16 days and doing it all, but then taking it back to their lives and trying to integrate it into their daily lives. It's a challenge. But ultimately, what we're inviting you to do is to develop the skills of being able to go into the deepest parts of your structure, access what's there and what doesn't belong, to literally be able to throw it away, to remove it. And what does that look like? What are we capable of? And I use an example. Michael J., my son, is a computer nerd. And when he was about 15, he decided he wanted to learn about computers. And I had a student friend in Kansas City who was a former NASA computer scientist. And he's someone that I worked with for several years. He'd done my work, and we just became buds over the years. And so I called Graham and I said, hey, Michael J. wants to learn about computers. I know you've got a computer school aside from about 4 computer businesses. Can Michael come and work with you? He said, sure. And Michael J., of course, was raised at Heartland. And thank you to Fran Tyner, because Fran was just the first 2 or 3 years that we were at Heartland. And Michael J. was, I guess he was about 8 or 9. And he became Fran's tail. He went everywhere Fran went. And Fran just had this ability to do anything with his hands. So Michael learned that skill from him. And so he ended up going and living at Graham's home and doing kind of an exchange with him for room and board while he was going to school and studying computers. Actually, over a period of a couple of years, when Michael J.'s stereo system left the house, we knew he'd gone to Kansas City, and that was it. But I tell the story because there was a point where I had bought a new computer, and when I got that computer up and running, got it online, this is back when you pushed the button, it went beep, 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 all these tones, and you got this crawling thing that happened. Well, it didn't work properly. So I called the company, and I don't know, I spent 2, 3, 4, 5 hours on with technical support. They couldn't get the computer working. So I said, well, pack it up, send it back to us, we'll fix it. So I packed it up, sent it back. 2 weeks later, I got the computer back. It's ostensibly fixed. I plug it in, same problem, exact same thing. So I got on the phone with tech support again, go through the whole routine. They can't get it working. So I don't bug Graham because he's a really busy guy. He's got 3 or 4 businesses. And so I picked up the phone, I called and said, Graham, I apologize for bugging you, but I got a problem. Can you help me? And so I explained what had happened, and I sent the computer back and they couldn't fix it. What do I do? It's a brand new computer. He says, okay, well, go to a C prompt. At that point, I was a little bit ignorant of computers. I said, what's a C prompt? And I followed his directions. He said, well, put in a string of letters and get a return. So I put in a string of letters, get a return. Read to me what it says. And I read it to him. And he says, okay, type in this string of characters, get a return. Read to me what it says. So I put that in, get a return, and I read it to him. He says, okay, your computer's fixed. What? Your computer's fixed. Now, come on, Graham. I mean, I sent it back to them. We've spent hours on the phone. Michael, your computer is fixed. Guess what? My computer was fixed. Now, the company that built the system couldn't troubleshoot what Graham did literally in 3 minutes on the phone. That's called having brain cells for something. Are there challenges in your life? Are there hostilities and fears that you can't seem to overcome? Are there disorders and diseases that just don't seem resolvable? Well, as I said, 5 to 10 years of engaging. And people say, well, that's a long time. I don't know if I want to. Well, what else is there to do? There is no other path to this end result than doing your work. You know, in the ancient times, they wanted an instant fix too. Well, $5, 5 minutes. What did they say? You can't storm the gates. You can't do it. It takes doing your work. You have this body-mind unit. There are generations and generations and generations of untoward energies in there, and you've just got to clean it up. Now, I spent the last half century studying how to do that, how it works, what that all means. And this is my end result. It is actually the thing that inspired me to take it to the next level. My son just turned 40, was his birth. And when he came into the world, it was just like so awesome. I delivered him, caught him with my hands. And it was just so amazing. And then I looked at the world at that time, and it's like, well, if somebody doesn't do something, there isn't going to be a world for this little one to grow up in. And this is what I did. And so I invite you to be on the team and be part of the process and key into how this process of healing works, what it really means. And the core of the forgiveness process, we're not actually going to get into doing the worksheet tonight, but we're going to get into what the core of the forgiveness process is. And from there, you can tap into, and you can go to our website, or probably to your phone's app store, and just type in the words Heartland, Heartland, one word, Aramaic, Aramaic, forgiveness. And you'll be looking at the world's, as far as I know, only forgiveness app. You can do the worksheet. There are 2 different versions of it on your phone now, once you download that. And or you can go to wagn.org, and in the upper left-hand corner of the page, it says Start Here. Click that button. It'll walk you through literally 50 years of what it took to understand how this process of forgiveness works. And what I'm going to explain to you right now, I didn't understand until I had worked with this for about 35 years. It took that to decode from the Aramaic and come to understand all of the aspects of how this comes together, the physiology, the physics, the psychology, the genetics of it, and how it all works. But suffice to say, in its shortest form at this moment, perception is the output of your mind. It's made of 9 bits of data. If your perception is fueled by any form of hostility or fear, you have a problem, because you are suffering from degraded perception. And your life will never go the way you want it to go while your perception is degraded. Underlying degraded perception is generations and generations and generations, our generation of unresolved hostility and fear. The thing that drives this whole process, and you'll notice in your life in general, I mean, unless you're just a naturally nasty person. If your persona is that degraded that you're a naturally nasty person, you'll notice that as long as everybody's doing what you want them to do, you're a pretty happy camper. But when someone, yourself or someone else, is not fulfilling a goal that you hold for them, that's when you go into hostility and fear, degraded perception, and untoward behavior. Wow, why? Well, how does all that work? Well, here's what happens. Obviously, if there are 10,000 brain cells firing, and this is the most quoted piece of psychological research, and it was done back in the 60s, if I remember correctly. This is the most quoted piece of research in psychological history. 9 bits of data, 10,000 brain cells fired. Now, there's other research that's come up since then that says, no, it's 13, it's 12, it doesn't matter. The point is, we get to see a little tiny fragment of what's really going on within us. And obviously, something has to determine which 9 bits of data your mind is going to use to build your perception. Something has to make that determination. What is it? The driver for that whole process is your goals. When you load a goal in the mind through resonance, everything associated with the frequency of that goal. Remember, everything is frequency. You know, I actually don't speak words. I've never spoken a word in my life, and neither of you. We call it words, but actually, I have a little flap of skin in my throat, and I know how to blow air over it so that it creates these things that we call words. But what's really happening is this air moving out causes air molecules to move. The air molecules moving cause a little drum inside of your ear to move, and that drum moving sets up an electrical frequency, and nothing is communicated by that except frequency. No light, no sound, no nothing goes in there or here. What goes in is frequency. And then that frequency causes brain cells to fire. And now your whole history, including your whole genetic history through the last 1,000 generations, is set into activity through the law of resonance. Whatever that goal resonates in you is going to be the information that is recruited by that goal to produce the perception, which includes your attitudes and your behaviors. If you don't like the behavior that you're doing, you know, we hear about the alcoholic that got drunk and did crazy stuff. And the next morning when they wake up, they're so repentant. Oh, that's so terrible. I will never do that again. And they really mean they're never going to do it again. But guess what? Next time they get drunk, they'll do it again. Remember we talked about inhibitors earlier? What's the first thing that happens with alcohol? Excessive amounts of alcohol have got inhibitors. And now all the generational patterns that were never allowed, that were always shut down, that were always inhibited, will come into play, and people do crazy stuff. And much as they feel sorry the next morning and swear they're never going to do it, unless they go in and clean up these generational patterns, they're going to do it the next time the circumstance warrants it. And so goals are the driver for this process of billions of bits of information moving in the world, billions of bits moving in us, and 9 bits end up producing the world we experience, the thoughts we think, the feelings we feel, and the energy we engage in. And this process is designed to be fueled by active present love. That's the power supply that it's designed to work with. Now, does anybody have a device in your home, your office, your shop, your car, your business that works really well when you unplug it? No. Human perception is designed to be fueled by human life. It's designed to be fueled by active present love. If your perception is fueled by hostility or fear, then you're not even human. Just because one has a human form does not mean they are human. Remember holding the newborn? Go back and hold that newborn child. Notice when you hold the newborn, what serenity, what peace, what sweetness, what the presence of love is like. Then ask yourself a question. Is the newborn loving me, or is the newborn love? My offering is, the newborn is the active presence of love, and so are you. If the active presence of love isn't active in your physiology, then there's no human life, because it is love that is human life. Remember Yeshua said, I come to bring you life? You look at his whole body of work, and the whole thing is about how do you get rid of the hostility or fear, and how do you fuel your mind by the active presence of love? Now, it's a 2-part process. One part of the process is the dissolution of the generational patterns that do not belong. That's called forgiveness. Forget about ever forgiving anybody ever again. And it always amazes me because I've had people who've been around my work 10, 15, 20 years, and they'll still talk about how well I forgave them. Stop. Never forgive anybody for anything. If you choose to pardon someone, they did something crazy, and you go, I can let that go. I'm going to let it go. I'll pardon you. I'll let you off the hook for that. That's done. But if you call that forgiveness, you won't actually do the next level, which is go inside yourself and remove and clean up the untoward energies that never belong within a human structure. So forgiveness is about the removal of what never belonged. That's half of the process. And the other half of the process is the integration of active love into every cell, to literally create a space in this form where love actively shows up in physiology. Now, the short form of the forgiveness process, and again, please use the radio show, ask questions. The short form of the forgiveness process is, the word forgive in Aramaic is shabag, and it literally translates from Aramaic to cancel. Now, what is it that I cancel? Do I cancel you? Well, that's murder. Problem. Do I cancel myself? Well, no, that's suicide. Let's let that one go. But what in every circumstance where I have upset or disturbance going on, that means there's an untoward energy moving in my physiology. If I'm going to come out of my denial, what is it that I can cancel to change that whole process? When I cancel my goal, the perception generated as a result of that goal collapses. When it collapses, I now have a clean and open space within my mind where these underlying energies can surface. Because when I cancel the goal and collapse the perception, what happens is a pathway is open into the unconscious or the dissociated contact. And what I've dissociated from, depending on my level of willingness, what I've dissociated from will start to come upward to awareness. Now, when I say awareness, it might just be awareness of the energy moving. And it might be specific memories of things that have happened. It's not necessary to go back and remember each dark, dirty, nasty thing that happened in your life. And it's not about laying on the couch and, examining what happened for 30 years until you find that thing. It's about living in and as the active presence of love, making a commitment to that. And as you walk through life, the next piece of work you're ready to do, resonance will bring somebody to you that will resonate what you need to deal with. If you keep it hidden, then you'll only get this surface projection and you'll think it's somebody else. When you cancel the goal, you collapse that perception. It took me 35 years to learn this piece of information. And I understand why the Greeks turned it into pardoning, letting other people off the hook. I understand it fully, because until you've got all these pieces, the physics, the physiology, the high energy, until you put all those pieces together, canceling a perfectly good goal does not make any sense at all. Gee, I just want that person to cherish me. And they're raging at me. Why would I cancel when I need to be cherished? Because I'm in terror. Oh, so my physiology is producing terror because I want to be cherished. Oh, so Michael, what you're saying is what you now understand about me is that in my file on being cherished, there's terror. Oh, okay, I see. So if I cancel my goal for them to cherish me, my projection on them collapses and it opens a pathway into all this terror that's stored within my brain cell structure, and maybe the terror that's stored from 30 generations ago that needs to be unwound. Oh, now I'm starting to see what forgiveness is as I cancel the goal. Now, I have a 9-bit processor. So we're going to call it for the sake of whatever term we're going to use. If I've got something that's been going on in my bloodline for 25 or 200 generations, and I can process 9 bits at a time, chance do I have? It's impossible. I mean, it's silly to even try. Fortunately, this man Yeshua understood another major piece of information. And that was that at creation, there was a power put in us that in Aramaic was called ruka dekudsha. The Greeks translated these words as the Holy Spirit. Nothing about a disembodied spirit being in the term ruka dekudsha in Aramaic. In Aramaic, those terms speak of a feminine elemental force in us that undoes the effects of our errors and teaches us the truth. So when I become willing enough, I will literally, I mean, one of my best examples for, I don't know, 35 years or more. If you were in my workshop 35 years, well, 15 years ago, these weren't the words at the top of the board. This word was suppressed. Literally, as I'm sitting and I'm making some changes to the worksheet, the one you see on the website now or in the app is probably at least version 3020. We're sitting doing some work with it, and literally, I'm told inside my head, Michael, it's not suppression. That's not clear enough. It's dissociation. What do you mean dissociation? It's not just that you've hidden it away. It's that it's no longer yours. It's gone. You can't change it. When you understand that denial, thinking or speaking as though something outside of you is the cause of this that's in you, then you have to believe that, hi, the real process is happening inside of you. This genius Yeshua, genius. I mean, how did he come up with this? I don't know. But here's what he showed us. Cancel the goal. Collapse the perception. Perception drops in on its root. You've now got access to the hidden part of your mind. Bring it forward in the presence of love, and then there's a super processor that is available to you. In Aramaic, it was called ruka dekudsha. She, a feminine elemental force in us that undoes the effects of our errors and teaches us the truth. So at the point where I cancel the goal and collapse, I may open so much that I'm so overwhelmed. This is part of the whole flood idea. You know, I'm so overwhelmed. There's just so much to move. How do I do it? I connect with ruka. What is ruka? In the original Arabic, they never said anything about God sending out the Spirit. What it says is the Creator sent out the breath. We have access to this phenomenal super processor called ruka dekudsha. She will, if you invite her to, undo the effects of your errors and teach you the truth. Now, if you've still got a use for one of your lives, well, I just want to keep this little bit of hostility back here so I need to protect myself. And she's not going to touch your hostility, but you're hang out with it all you need, all you want. But when you're really just surrender, when you're ready to really let it all go, she will process you right down to your genetic toes. And this is what we want to connect you to. She will teach you. I can't teach you. She will teach you. That power is in you. It's yours. It was given to you from the beginning. It's always been there for us. And the world taught us to pay attention to the gods out there. We start to recognize the process is that of collapsing pained perception, allowing it to drop in on itself, and allowing those underlying energies to come forward in the presence of love for dissolution. It is the removal process. I use a visualization. Now, we got to see too many times, and, just went by the anniversary, it's on TV again. We talk about kids with PTSD. What do you suppose was happening to kids on 9/11? Little 2, 3, 4, 5-year-olds when they watch time after time these buildings go down. And they didn't know that it only happened once and it was a repeat. Talk about PTSD. That's what a lot of people are walking around with. It needs to be forgiven, needs to be cleaned up. But if you think about when those towers were hit and they collapsed in on their own footprint, that free fall speed, not possible from a point of view of physics, but that's another story. but think about how those towers collapsed in on the wrong footprint and use that as a visualization for when you cancel a goal, when you're really willing and you cancel a goal, your perception will collapse. It'll drop in on its own footprint and you get to heal whatever's at the root of that. That is the process of forgiveness.
Okay, Michael, where are you?
Be right here.
Okay. Oh, that was an hour, 4 minutes of a massive amount of information.
I think it's perfect that you're going to be able to send it out to everybody. So if someone wants to review it,
yes.
it's a process of building brain cells. You go back to Yeshua 2,000 years ago, and he says his work is only for those who have the eyes to see and the ears to hear. I think we can safely assume most everybody in the audience had what we call eyes and ears. So it wasn't about that. It's about building brain cells for the actual meaning of his actual words, rather than somebody else's interpretation.
All right. Okay, it's question time.
And 5 days a week from 1 till 2 o'clock Eastern time,
Oh,
if you want to engage in a conversation about these ideas, if you start to use the worksheet, if you download the app, we have a radio show Monday through Friday, 1 till 2 o'clock Eastern time. It's on internet radio. You can go to our website, whyagain.org, and listen to it on your computer. Most people, because they've got unlimited long distance, simply call into the show, and the call-in number is 563-999-3581, 563-999-3581. If you call that number, you're listening to the show, push 1, and we're having a conversation, and we're there. Been doing this show for 10 years. There's, 3,500 or so hours in our archives. You're welcome back. They're all free. They're all on the website. The app is there free, and we're here to support you.
absolutely awesome. I'm sure everyone will agree that there's new and relevant information to what's going on in our personal lives and how this could truly make a difference. So,
And collectively, what we create in the world.
Yeah.
And it's time
Yeah.
for the individuals to take responsibility.
Exactly.
Most everybody's saying that needs to change out there. That needs to change. No, it's an internal process. That's
okay. All right. We got our first question from Mark.
Well, with that being said, I want to jump in.
Okay,
Go for
so
it.
then Mark's gonna have to wait. Diana snuck in first, Mark.
I'm just real quick. I'll save my big stuff for the end, maybe, unless everybody else asks questions and answer it. But I can speak from experience. I have known Dr. Ryce since probably the early 1990s, and he literally changed my life. While I was in one of his talks, and I was at Unity of Overland Park, and everything just shifted for me when I realized that these goals that he talks about, which are sort of like subconscious expectation, let's say, is what the way I interpreted it. It was like instantly I got it. It's like, oh my God, my whole life I have been expecting my mother to be June Cleaver. And she was never going to be June Cleaver. And I was able to literally pull that out of my head. And I remember the lecture. He did a meditation where it was like these resentments were stored inside of us, and we literally pulled them out like they were a carrot that was buried in our brains, and we just pulled it out, and it changed my life. It totally gave me a paradigm shift, and my whole energy system just changed, because I was no longer just being a nice little spiritual girl, loving my mother anyway, getting letting her get off the hook for, not being the loving, kind, wonderful, supportive mother that I had thought that she should have been. And instead, I learned to love her and accept her for what she is and what she was. She's no longer with us, but she was a very powerful woman, and we were just very different. And after that, I started following Michael. I've been to his intensives before. I've been to Heartland, which is an absolutely wonderful place when the magic happens, when everybody gets together. And Michael, I am just eternally grateful to you for the understanding that I have received. And like you said, it just keeps getting deeper and deeper and deeper in understanding as you work with these worksheets and you internalize the whole concept and everything. I just love his work. Thank you, Michael.
Thank
and
you.
thank you for
Honored.
coming and speaking with us. Really appreciate it.
Delighted. Unfortunately, Heartland isn't operating right now with the whole COVID thing going on. The last 2 summers we haven't opened, but we are doing online intensives and have different packages available and ways to participate. Radio shows there, free archives, thousands of hours of conversation along these lines so that people can build the brain cells and really comprehend what this whole process was about that was being taught 2,000 years ago.
And we also learn how to eat properly too, and learn to appreciate whole life food. And that made such a big difference as well. And I thank you for teaching us that.
Yeah, our food program, when people would come to Heartland, we did a total fresh and raw program. We didn't cook anything. The food is absolutely awesome. And now when we're doing our intensives online, if somebody buys one of the intensives, it's a self-study or participates in one of the live intensives that unfolds. And this was actually the first hour of a 90-hour codependence to independence communication practice. That's 1 hour out of 90 hours of self-study. But we have a private Facebook page now where there's 14 weeks of recipes for fresh and raw meals. If people want to really learn, what do you need in the way of equipment? What do you need to order? Where do you order it? And how do you prepare it? There are videos, there are audios. We have a woman who's a raw food chef that just did an awesome job. And that's part of our intensive packages, whether it's a live one that we're doing or a self-study. So lots of ways to grab the tools.
All right, let's jump into our first question from Mark.
Hi, Mark.
Go ahead.
I was just, when you were giving your speech, I was reminded of Joseph in the Bible.
Uh-huh.
In the way he reacted to his brothers, I thought was an example of what you were trying to say in regards to, he could have reacted in one way, but he perceived their action as a gift of God or a gift of the Creator, the sacred, and as the purpose of what happened, not as a way of judging his brothers and condemning them.
Right. Yeah, he was functioning as a human being.
And so he was giving you the example of what you're, that's my perception.
Yeah.
If you wanted a physical, if you wanted something to look at to see how to do it, refer to Joseph.
Yeah, he stayed attuned to that state of being. Over here on the left side of the board is the answer that people give us when we ask the question, have you ever held a newborn? What would you describe as the essence of that newborn? And that's the truth of who we are. That is always the same. You can't change that vibration. That's who we are. But if we live out of hostility and fear, then we perceive all kinds of things that aren't there. And Joseph is a perfect example of staying attuned to his human beingness rather than functioning out. Yeshua talks about in order for you to live, you've got to die. In order for you, being, to live, the non-being, the self that's based in hostility and fear has to go. And forgiveness is how to remove that. Otherwise, you create your life out of that hostility and fear, and that's when it gets to be crazy time. So I'm with you 100% on that. It is an excellent example of what Joseph did with that.
That's why, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's it.
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
that's why Yeshua said, judge not, lest you be judged, because you need to look at yourself and then pull it out of yourself, like you said.
Yeah.
If you can't pull it out of yourself, then then you still have the same problem.
You get to live. Why is this happening to me again? The title of my book. Good point, Mark. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any support we can be for anybody, any questions, anything that didn't make sense or anything that needs clarified, I'm here to do it. And I have as much time as we need. Not everybody at once, though. I mean,
Well, there was so much information to digest. I have a feeling that people are somewhat overwhelmed.
well, I'm glad that you're going to pass the link on so you can
Yes.
watch it repeatedly. And each time you watch it, it'll change totally because, you think you heard my lecture. The truth is you heard what vibrated in your ears, what came from your brain cells. And as you go through it and use the tools, it'll get clearer and clearer and clearer and open this state of being. Christine.
Yes. Is it?
Oh, put your webcam on, Christine.
Oh, I'm gonna.
We want to see your sweet face.
There she is. Okay. We see DQ. Now you're on mute or something.
How about now?
Okay.
Am I there?
Yeah. Well, we get
It's
one
really-
or the other. I don't
It's
know.
really hard- it's
Okay,
really
go
hard
ahead,
to do
go.
with the phone.
All right.
But I was gonna ask, so is it the best way to perceive this? Is it to look at everybody as a brand new baby?
Yeah, if we can live out of, we talk about loving each other. The truth is, nobody's ever loved you and nobody's ever going to love you. God doesn't love you and you've never loved anyone and you're never going to love anyone. Love is a state of being. It's what we are. It's not something we do. We came into the world as love. The world, for most people, knocked it out of us as quickly as possible and then told us to go out and find somebody to love us. And now we're living in a false definition. It's interesting. If you read the words of Vladimir Lenin, and he's probably responsible for more deaths on planet Earth than any human being in history, he says the way you destroy a culture is change the meaning of its words. If you think love is something you do, then you'll try to do it and do it and do it and do it. And it won't happen because let's say if you've got rage in you, through resonance, you're going to draw somebody in who will bring up your rage. If your rage comes up and you're trying to love that person, it's impossible because they're resonating that rage or that fear or the sadness or the grief or the hate or whatever it is. When you strive to live as the presence of love, we're told by the Greeks that Yeshua said, love God, love your neighbor as yourself. He didn't say that at all. If you go to the Aramaic, he said, have Rachma, and Rachma is a filter in the frontal lobes of the brain that is a gateway that love enters and keeps your mind on track with that state of being. Joseph, perfect example. That gateway was open to him. He lived his love. He perceived from the mind of being, which in Aramaic was called the mind of Christ. It's not a religious idea. You and I have a birthright to live in the mind of the Creator, the mind of love. The world says, get out of there and come live with us. We want you in hostility and fear. And until you forgive your hostility and fear, then there'll always be somebody else to blame for it. And we can strive. In Aramaic, he said, have Rachma, keep this gateway open when you think of the Creator, when you think of neighbor, in order to maintain self, in order to maintain who you are, to live as a human being. And the self based in hostility or fear has to go. And that self, the non-being self, the self based in rage and guilt and fear, is removed through forgiveness. When you've made the space, there's an interesting line in what's been called the Lord's Prayer. And by the way, it's not a prayer, but there's an interesting line there that can be translated as saying to the Creator, carve out a space in me for your wholeness, for the presence of love, for the presence of being.
Love it.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Thank you.
Honored.
Okay, who's
Delighted.
next? Dawn? We don't see you, Dawn, and your microphone's off. There we
We
go.
see DQ.
There she is.
Hi.
Okay,
Hi, sorry, it took me a minute to do that. I apologize.
no problem.
So I typed my question in. It's pretty basic, but what Dr. Rice was talking about, the different goals. Can you give us some other examples of goals, I guess, that that people might or have brought to you on your radio show or other places?
Sure. Yeah. Let's take a simple one. I mean, everybody says, I just want them to love me. And they don't love me, and they just cause such rage in me. The person who tells me that somebody out there doesn't love them properly and they're enraged just told me that in the file on their mind, there's rage on love. The file for love in their mind has a lot of rage in it. And so when they set the goal to be loved, thinking love as a verb, and that resonates their rage, then they say that enraged me. The truth is, the reason they're enraged is because that rage is in them. When they cancel the goal to be loved, then they'll collapse the surface mind, that little 9-bit mind's perceptual construct. And when it collapses in on itself. Remember the 9/11 towers went down and we saw that free fall and that thing fell into its own footprint. It's a good way to think about forgiveness. When I cancel the driver that drives my perceptual mind, it collapses in on its own footprint. So when I cancel the goal to be loved and I get to collapse that perceptual construct, I get to go back to the origin of the rage. When I can bring forward the origin of the rage, if you look at our worksheet process, the step-by-step process that's in the app or you can do on our website, the step before you cancel the goal, you really set and connect to love. And so when I cancel the goal and collapse my perception, and if underneath it is rage, then I'm going to access and be able to bring my rage forward in the pure presence of love. The core of healing is that when there's something hidden in the unconscious that needs to come forward for healing, and there is active love present, when it does come forward, there's a transmutation of energy and it removes what never belonged. That's the forgiveness process.
So I have had someone that I need to approach about something that happened, and I've been putting this off and trying to set it aside. And now I know why, because I needed to hear you tonight. So thank you very much.
Cool. Well, delighted, glad to be on the team.
Thank you.
And when you cancel the goal that you hold for them, that's how you get clarity in your mind. And then instead of coming forward from the unresolved energetic dynamic in myself, I come forward from a state of being. I'm going to be a whole lot better at producing the results I want when I do that.
Yeah. Amen. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Delighted.
That's a blessing.
Honored.
Okay,
All right.
awesome. Amanda, you're next.
There's a song about you.
Amanda.
Amanda, light up my life.
That one's my favorite. So this has been really synchronistic. I don't even know if that's the right word. With a lot of different things that I've been working on, working on trying to figure out how to raise my vibration and residual energies from, previous generations and things like that. So I'm so grateful for your presentation tonight. Is there a specific website, or do we have some information coming to us that tells us how to look up more information about what you are doing?
Okay. So my website, and it's about a 20,000 page website, so you can spend lots of time on it. We've got videos, audios, we've got all kinds of materials leading to and helping people to build the brain cells. And the website is WHY, again, AGAIN.org. Again, you can also go to your app store on your phone Our teaching center is Heartland. Type in the word Heartland. It's all one word, Heartland, Aramaic, Aramaic, forgiveness. You'll be looking at the world's only forgiveness app. Whether you've got an iPhone or an Android, doesn't matter. Go to your app store. You can download the app, and there's the forgiveness process step by step. And then the phone number for the radio show, 563-999-3581, from 1 till 2 o'clock Eastern time, 5 days a week. So it'll be noon to 1 o'clock your time. The show is actually 2 hours long. I do the second hour of the show. There's a gentleman who's a clinical psychologist in Chicago that's done my work for the last 17 or 18 years. And he used to co-host the show with me. And then he got to the point where he was ready to do his own. So he does the first hour, answering questions, having the conversation. And then I do the second hour from 1 till 2 o'clock Eastern, or noon to 1 o'clock your time. So there are all the ways you can access it. If you go to our website, there's a link to our YouTube channel. I don't know how many videos we've got there, dozens and dozens and dozens of videos. And the worksheets are on the site. You can do them live on the site. You can download and you can print them. We have a whole series of workshops that we do. And each one sources from the Aramaic forgiveness process, but then goes into the arena of communication or relationships. We have a workshop called Healing Through Relationships, Purpose, Personal Power, and Commitment. People who aren't living out of their purpose float around in life and become very manipulatable by that. When you get clear on your purpose, we've got a worksheet step by step. Most of the workshops have a worksheet involved, and they're all listed on the website.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And thank you for this today. I'm so excited.
Honored and delighted. And again, call the radio show, ask questions. That's what we're there for.
Okay.
Our commitment is to take these tools literally to every mind, heart, and being on the planet. And so they're the different mechanisms we're using to do that. And if you've got anywhere else that wants a Zoom presentation, I'm always available. I mean, there's a fellow who used to organize my schedule for me. And he used to say, if I got a chance, I'd do a workshop in a phone booth. And it's true. The purpose of my life is to give these tools away, to make them available to people. So any way we can support, that's what we're here for.
That's what makes you
Good
so
book,
awesome.
too.
Okay, next person is Shannon.
Hey, Shannon.
Yeah, you must be on mute.
Are you muted, Shannon?
Good. Can you guys hear me?
There you go. You're good.
All right.
I
I just wanted to talk about the goals again.
Yes.
I guess my main question would be, how long on average does it take to dismiss or get rid of that? And then also, I had another question.
Well, let's go with that one first. What do you
Yeah.
think about the other one? It takes as long as it takes. They asked that question of Yeshua 2,000 years ago. And in essence, what they said to him is, how many times do I need to forgive my brother? How many of these worksheets do I have to do? Is 7 enough? And we're told by the Greek translations that he said, no, 7 times 70. In Aramaic, he actually said 77 times 70. So I don't know for you around an issue, like, it depends on your skill level. It depends how deep this issue is. If it's something that goes back 10 generations, it's going to take some time to work through it. If it's something that happened in your childhood, it's probably not going to take nearly as much time unless it was a big traumatic event. And then just getting close to it can be such a trauma that it's going to take time to develop the skill to really be able to grasp that energy, to hold it in the presence of love and to work through it. So, there's no calendar that you can do for how long is it going to take.
And then I think my other question was, are you mentally canceling this, or are you actually physically speaking this out into the universe, saying this out loud?
You can speak it out loud. You can do it silently in your mind. I use an example, and maybe everybody wants to do this with me. So let's imagine that about 2 feet in front of your face, there's a red rubber ball. And I'm going to invite you to reach out and take a hold of that red rubber ball. Would everybody do that right now? Now, why did you do what you just did? Most people say, well, because you asked me to. I said, no, you didn't do it because I asked you to. Some people didn't do it at all. I asked them, why didn't they do it? Because they didn't set a goal to do it. Goals generate behavior. Now, I'm going to invite you once again to imagine the red rubber ball is there and start to reach out for it. When you get your hand about halfway there, cancel the goal to reach for it. What happens? Your behavior changes. When you cancel goals, goals drive behavior. When you cancel goals, behavior changes. And it's a practice. Now, if you live in a world where you're holding tight to everything every minute, you ever play the parlor game of you squeeze a broomstick as tight as you can for 2 minutes and then you try to open your fingers? They don't open. If you've been holding on forever, it's probably going to take some practice to get those mental, emotional muscles to come loose. It's a totally individual process, and it will take as long as it takes. I'll just say that I've been doing and developing this work for a half a century now. And the most important internal process work that I've done in my life from my own process has happened to me in the last 2 years. As you develop skills, you move to deeper and deeper places, and places that people in your bloodline have never gone. If you're the early adopter, if you can't think of anybody in your life, mom, dad, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, who live as the presence of love, then you're the early adopter. That means you're handling the energy for the whole energy system. And it takes time. Be patient with yourself. And know that we're there 5 days a week to support you. And engaging in the conversation is how you build brain cells to make it your own.
Okay, thank you.
Delighted.
One thing I'd like to add to that, Shannon, is that doing the work, I found out that sometimes one thing turns into a lot of other things because I find a pattern, and I'm able to just dissolve it all like a big chunk. And I call that things coalesce. And so sometimes that'll happen, and it's like, oh my gosh, it's like a Christmas present when that happens.
Right. Well, and the forgiveness process, there's a thing we call the Hydra worksheet. And we've got a step-by-step, 7-step, here's how you forgive. And some of those worksheets are Hydra worksheets. And if you remember in Greek philosophy, the Hydra was the creature that when you cut off her head, a dozen other heads grew out of the stump. Well, we have a place on our website. If you go to the microphone on our website, which is for our radio show, we have a listing of some special workshops and or special radio shows. And there are many that were done where we actually walk somebody through the whole step-by-step forgiveness process. And there's one in particular, and a woman called in, and she had some stuff going on with herself and her spouse. And when she finished that worksheet, she had a list of 17 worksheets to do. That's the Hydra. You take one out, and it boom, 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 boom. All the underlying things start to move. And that's what you want, although it's not always fun. It's not Dr. Feelgood to heal. You have to face yourself. You have to deal with yourself. You have to feel what's in there. And sometimes that can be painful and traumatic. And that's part of the healing process. The key is to develop the skills of using the tools, and it gets easier and easier.
Okay, we have one more question from Adam.
Hey, Adam, welcome.
Hi, Michael. I look at things, well, actually, I noticed something you were saying, and I was just wondering why you bring up the idea of twin towers, and you've been bringing this up and using it as an example of falling down, which is such a traumatic experience or something like that. What is your purpose in this conversation to keep bringing up that terrible event?
Well, my input is that it's a visual. The idea of perception being a construct of the mind, and that you can collapse it in on its own footprint. That's a well-known event that everybody knows about where something collapsed in on its own footprint, and it gives them a way to visualize, oh, so I have this rage or sadness or grief-filled perceptual construct, and I can collapse it in on its own footprint, and I'm going to get to access what's at the root of it. When I think of something as a traumatic event, there's where I want to start to do some worksheets. And when I do, then I'm going to clean that out in myself. So that might be a good worksheet topic is, you know, the 9/11 event and what's the pain that I'm still carrying about it. And maybe that'd be a place to do a piece of work. You might find it useful. Does that make sense? Okay, cool.
Yes.
Nancy.
Okay, Nancy, we have 2 more questions now. Nancy's next.
Okay. Go for it, Nancy. We got you.
Yes, there we go. All right, so I'm kind of thinking out loud when I say this. So when you cancel the goal and collapse the perception,
Right.
so I guess to me, canceling the perception is either synonymous.
No, you don't cancel the perception. You collapse the perception by canceling the goal.
Yes, yes, that's what I meant. Cancel the goal and collapse the perception. So canceling the perception, to me, in my mind, and I want to make sure I'm thinking of this correctly, it's like you're obliterating a neural pathway. So we all have, well, I'll just speak for myself. I have certain, I guess I'd call it disintegrative go-to patterns that aren't the best for
defaults,
me.
right?
Yeah, okay. So then actually, and the way it's been explained to me before is that, so that's a certain neural pathway that's been established. Right. So if I can disintegrate, I guess, that neural pathway, then I can work on new, more new positive neural pathways in order to bring new results into my life and that, because I have no illusions that anything that, in other words, anything in my life I'm not happy about. I already know it's not about other people. Unfortunately, it's all about me. So, but then the good thing is then I can change that, because
that's the good news. Yes.
Yeah. So I guess it's, you know, but the neural pathway, that's, you're obliterating it. So to speak.
Well, my take would be this. There's a core experience that holds whatever the hate, the fear, the rage, the guilt, the pain, the drama, whatever it is. And yeah, we build neural pathways. There might be a half a dozen different circumstances that have this at its core. When I can cancel the goal and collapse into that, then I can bring that forward directly. As long as I'm in denial, you made me mad. Every time you do something that brings up my anger and I say, you made me mad, my brain shows me that you're the cause of my mad. And so I get to be in relationship with my mad, but I experience it indirectly through my brain's image of you. When I can collapse that perception, then I can go to directly accessing what's at the root of it. When I bring what's at the root of it forward in the presence of love, it dissolves. Now I'm free of it. Now I can move in a whole different world, literally the world between my ears. Does that fit?
Yeah, it does. The only in the presence of love. So, I mean, I suppose that as we're all working on this, it would be the understanding. It would be the understanding that we would do it in the presence of love. So I suppose I think that will just be something natural that okay. So not, then how
not for people who are living over here. Well, once you tap in, when you look at the worksheet or you go to the app and you see the worksheet process, you identify the goal, you lay out the situation, you identify the goal, and then in step 4, then you literally consciously, purposely bring forward conscious active love. And it becomes a habit. That's something that I'm going to do. I'm going to enter that practice. So now, before I cancel the goal, I'm bringing love forward. I cancel the goal, and I'm purposely, consciously willing to stay connected to love. When that underlying, I can go back, it's about probably 30 years or so ago. And I've been doing this work for about 20 years and seen a lot of really, magnificent stuff, awesome healing. And I'm like, what's at the root of this? There were 30 people in the room. One person healed, everybody else is still in their stuff. What happened? There's the story of the woman who has the 12-year issue of blood in relationship to Yeshua. And, in that culture, she can't even enter the kitchen. She's unclean. She can't feed her family. That's a pretty heavy duty thing. And we're told in that story, there's a throng of people around Yeshua. And people want to say Yeshua healed her. That's not what Yeshua said. Yeshua said, no, it was your work. She's the only one in the whole crowd that healed because she was ready. She was doing her work. She needed support. So what did she do? Did she touch a piece of cloth? No. The hem of his garment needed the vitalization of touching into his vital energy field. And that strengthened her. And she was able to process through whatever was at the root of that. Each time you consciously, purposely connect to the active presence of love, you strengthen your ability to live there. And so I go back that 30 years ago, and it's like, well, what happened that caused that to take place? And here's what became clear to me. Every time over the years that I'd seen, real healing happen. I'm talking about people had physical diseases that were incurable. I'm talking about financial diseases. I'm talking about relationships that, they could never be healed. And all of a sudden there was in an instant, a whole shift around. And what became clear to me is 2 things occurred. Love was conscious, active, and present. And something that was less than love, that was held in the unconscious, peaked up. And that transmutation took place. So step 4 in the worksheet is entering that practice, then canceling the goal and stepping into the willingness. And then, as I said in the earlier session, Yeshua taught 2,000 years ago about this power in us, Ruka Dekudsha, that was this feminine elemental force. This feminine elemental force will never violate your free will. You get to do whatever you want to hang out in your pain, your trauma, you get to do it forever. But if you invite her, then by definition in Aramaic, what Ruka Dekudsha, or what the Greeks translate as the Holy Spirit, is there's this literal, actual elemental force in us that undoes the effects of our errors and teaches us the truth. So if I'm willing, literally, those error energetic patterns in me that come from over on this side of the board are removed. And I will get specific instructions about the truth of this situation. And that's where the shift takes place.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
So it's a practice. The whole thing, every step of it, canceling the goals, connecting to love, it's a practice. And people who enter into the practice, things change. People say, well, I only want to spend 5 minutes on this. Oh, okay, then you don't need to do it. But sooner or later, if you want the change to take place, you've got to do it.
Thank you.
Oh,
Okay.
Nancy
We're
had
gonna
another,
we're gonna take one more question. It's already 9 o'clock.
well, it's early.
well,
Well, it's
I had-
early. I'm still recording.
I just wanted to mention, Nancy, you had a second part to your question because you had entered your question in the chat. You wanted to know, can this be accomplished without doing intensives?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, this is meant to be done for yourself, by yourself. All the support is there on the website, the radio show. Absolutely.
Thanks,
Each
Dan.
of the tools is designed to be used independently. We're looking to support people having a direct relationship with that power inside themselves where the real teacher is. The real teacher isn't out here. The real teacher's in here.
Thank you.
And everything's designed to connect us with that.
Great.
All the questions have been so good, that's why I'm still recording.
Hey, let's go for it.
Okay, Todd, you get the next question, and I'm going to stop the recording, and if anyone really wants to keep going, we'll keep going.
Okay, thank you very much for your talk. I've just touched the surface of your website, and I don't even know if this is a question, but I was wondering if you could maybe elaborate a little bit on resonance and and also maybe elaborate a little bit on the generational aspect of I guess it's the fear and hostility which is carried through.
Mhm.
And then maybe how Yeshua, like maybe a parable that Yeshua would maybe have used in relation to that. If that makes sense.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure about that last part, but it's just the law that governs how energy fields operate is that law of resonance. It's a law of energy exchange. We say in the culture, birds of a feather flock together. That's just a way of saying resonance. If my vibe, if the vibration, the energy I'm engaged in matches yours, we're going to tend to be attracted to each other. And so that's how resonance operates.
So let me interject then. I mean, I don't mean to interrupt, but so in that relation, because what you described is if somebody was having a bad day or like, and then all of a sudden, just like how you hit a piano note and all the other strings resonated at certain vibrations. Right. So and then I've been in situations where I'll be having a good day and then this person, and then all of a sudden, we're like this, not I'm at that resonance frequency or that I'm like in fear and hostility, trying to defend or whatever. So you're saying if I'm practicing, conscious, if love is conscious, present, and active, then that is actually a total, that resonant frequency can't even enter my, is this what you're saying?
It's going to repel. It's going to repel.
Yes. Yes.
And if I'm in a low place and I'm in my fear place, that person yesterday who tried to yell and scream and everything, I just like looked at them, like what's the difference? Today, if I'm in a low place, it might be I'm right there with it, and that's why the ongoing forgiveness process, the removal of those root energies of hostility, fear, sadness, grief, rage, drama, and trauma. Those generational patterns need to be faced and removed. If you look at it, this body-mind unit is a device that if you talk to a physiologist, they'll tell you that your body is made of, the base element is carbon. Does anybody know how many electrons there are in a carbon atom? How many protons, how many neutrons? There's 6 electrons, 6 protons, 6 neutrons, 6, 6, 6. Where is the hostility and fear stored? But in the generations, in the tissue structure, Adamos, the red clay. Remember they talked about in the scriptures, Adam went into a deep sleep, and they don't say a word about him waking up, because most people are still lost in this, functioning in this, and haven't even touched the truth of who they are. As you apply forgiveness and remove those frequencies, face the generations, you get freed of carbon-based memory. We have built in, there's a workshop we do called Codependence to Interdependence. And in that workshop, we bring forward the concept of what we call a power person. And a power person is someone who had more power over your life than you did at some point in your life, was not functioning as love. So those two things are the main factors. They're more power, was not functioning as love, and you perceive that circumstance as survival. When that occurs, this energy field opens and we become like a sponge. Every energy that's in the environment with that power person dynamic, and it's usually apparent, though not always, it's just like we're a sponge. It just gets sucked in. Once that dynamic, that power person dynamic is established in someone's mind, until it is addressed and removed, and it's hidden in the unconscious. You have to, and forgiveness is how to open the unconscious. Once that's established, forevermore, there are only 3 behaviors that person will do in their lives. And I just invite you to just check it out and see. The behaviors they'll do will be governed by the level of stress that they're under. When there's no stress, they'll do whatever they did to get along with their power person. When stress starts to build, they'll do whatever they did to resist and survive with their power person. When they become ultra stressed, they'll do what their power person did to them that they hated the most. And my offering is that's what runs the world. And it's the forgiveness of those dynamics from carbon-based memory. And those things have been established over generations and generations and generations. Go back to that story about the Jews wandering in the desert for 40 years. Now, think about this logically for a minute. These are pretty bright people. They know astronomy pretty well. They know the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. Could they have really been lost for 40 years in a 35 square mile area? That makes no sense. The desert is a code word for the unconscious. Most people live about the first 40 years of their lives unconscious, not questioning everything, believing everything that carbon-based memory feeds to them. And of course, especially believing it's all everybody else's fault. That's living in the desert. Remember what happened, what needed to happen to get out of the desert. What did they say? Read that passage. It says the old generation had to die off. That doesn't mean that everybody in old physical bodies had to physically die. The root of the word generation is genari. It means cause. All of the causes held in carbon-based memory from the generations had to be removed, forgiven, in order to rise above the power person dynamic and get back to living as a human being. And life abhors us being diseased. So through resonance, we're going to draw somebody in that's going to show us the deepest disease energy that we hold. And we're going to do one of 2 things when they show it to us. We're going to blame them, or we're going to stop and go, oh, here I am again with this. Here, maybe this is something for me to forgive. Life is going to continuously give you the opportunity to learn forgiveness. If you refuse, then you get to live the title of my book. Why is this happening to me again? The title of this workshop.
That's awesome. That's a great way to end the recording. Love that
All right.
answer. Thank you so much.